Maybe you can relate to this if you've ever spent time and energy to figure out how you want to communicate something with your spouse so that it does land, whether that's a request or whether that's you're giving them some feedback or whether you're just pouring your heart out about something really difficult and you're met with a blank stare, or worse, they get defensive. You're definitely not alone. This is like such a common thing in marriage. I see this all the time. I think that the real battle, it's not so much about do I have a point or not, or who's right or wrong. It's more about how do we remove the barriers to being and feeling heard? Because if your voice isn't heard, if you don't feel like what you're saying is landing, that's going to break the emotional connection. And if you don't have a strong emotional connection, then it's so much harder to problem solve or negotiate differences or get on the same side of the table. So today I'm going to share 5 ways that you can communicate so that your spouse actually wants to hear you. If you incorporate these into your talks going forward, this is going to allow them to really hear you in a way that brings you closer and not farther away. So the first thing is you want to keep in mind that when you're communicating, always share from the I place. Whether this is feedback or some observations or some concerns you have, speak from the I place. That's what makes it constructive. You are sharing about you in all of your feedback, even if you see that it's about them. The way that you present it is always sharing about you. This is what I saw, and this is what it meant to me, right? It's a reveal. It's not a finger point. And this is pretty easy, I think, for most people to understand, but most people do talk to their spouse about their spouse. They use you statements. They speak about the other person's intentions. They're talking about the other person's needs, what their feelings are, what their reasons for things are. You did this because of that. It's very easy to slip into our speculation and our analysis in talking about them to them. And that is one of the fastest ways for them to go into the mode of correcting or defending or explaining. And the point of what you're really trying to say is getting lost. So always share from the I place and avoid you statements at all costs. Now, a common mistake that couples make that I think also blocks connection and understanding is when you confuse feelings with thoughts. So to be truly heard, I really recommend separating out thoughts and feelings. A lot of people don't know what this means, but I think what most people do is they share their meaning making as though these are emotions that the other person caused. So for an example, you might say, I feel disrespected. I feel like you don't care about me. So first of all, this is going to create defensiveness and confusion because they're going to want to reframe that, right? As soon as you lead with that, they're going to say, no, that's not it. I wasn't disrespecting you. You're going to feel invalidated, even though they're just trying to give you a different way of looking at it because they want you to feel better. They want you to not think that about them. They want to give you a different way of looking at it so that you're not hurt or taking it personally or giving it the meaning that you're giving it. And so they're just not going to hear you if you come at it that way and you're confusing the thoughts and the interpretations with the emotion. So, and the second thing I wanted to say about it is really not accurate. Aside from the fact that they're going to want to step in and like defend themselves or correct you, it really isn't accurate to say, I feel like you don't care or I feel disrespected, because that's not an emotion. Disrespected is not an emotion. That's an interpretation of what the other person has done. Or to say, I feel like you don't care about me, that's a thought I'm having. So it gets you sidetracked, right? Because now you're arguing about the meaning making as opposed to the feeling that you're having. So if you can tune into the feeling that you're having and share the feeling and separate that from the meaning making, you're going to be removing a major obstacle to being heard by your spouse. Now, number 3, the best way to be heard, I think, in any kind of situation, especially if you're dealing with hot button issues, is to stay calm. The right words are going to be lost if the energy is incongruent. You could have the perfect I statement, the perfect feedback, structure, and you know exactly what you're going to say and what you're not going to say, and you're really prepared. But then if you come in with let's say your words technically aren't blaming, but your tone is admonishing, they don't even hear what it is that you said. They just hear the energy that you're bringing. And we've talked about this before, right? That so much of communication is nonverbal. So don't waste your words. Don't waste your preparation. Don't waste the thought that you put into a communication if you're not going to come in with calm energy, because you're just going to waste your own time. This is easier said than done, obviously, especially if what you're communicating about is linked with something where there's hurt feelings or there's a history there, so it's loaded. So you have to be very strong in emotional regulation, first of all. Now, a really important way to do that is to be strong in your conviction of knowing that you don't need validation. So much of intensity, so much of coming forward in a conversation where it is really charged up is because one person is ready to fight because they're maybe anticipating not being heard, or they're really, it's a protest against the disconnection or the perception that maybe what they're saying doesn't matter. They're worried that they don't matter. They're worried their spouse thinks that what they have to say is wrong or doesn't matter. And so they're coming in hot right out of the gate. And so if you can tune into the fact that, like, I don't need to convince anybody of anything. I know what I want. I know what I'm advocating for. This is something that is not up for debate. The validity of what I'm bringing is not up for debate. If you internalize that, that will help so much, because then you know, like, first of all, it prevents you from getting derailed in the conversation because you're very clear. And it's like, well, I'm not here to defend that. We're going to keep it constructive, first of all. But also, it allows you to stay centered so that they can hear the words that you've prepared, as opposed to feeling like they're getting judgment or resentment or anything like that. So this also, aside from emotional regulation skills, is going to require just knowing yourself and picking the right time. Sometimes when we have a lot of urgency to bring something up right now, that's a sign that we're probably not calm. There's a lot of drive behind it. Like, this has to come up right now because I'm upset, because I want to feel some kind of different way, because I have to get this thing from the conversation in order to feel better. When you're in that state of urgency, you're probably not as calm as you need to be if it's something that you really want to be heard. I know that this was something I did in my relationship early on, is I would always like pick the wrong time. And I think unconsciously it's because then I could prove to myself, see, I wasn't going to be heard anyway. But I didn't really set it up for success by choosing the right time and being very strategic. I'm going to wait until I'm feeling very calm, very centered, very clear. And then when I come forward, I know that I haven't already sabotaged the conversation with the energy that I brought. That also allows you to isolate if you bring a really calm energy and things still don't go well. You know that it's not that. You have a better opportunity to figure out what's getting in the way and what do I need to change in my communication, or what do they need to change in their filter so that they can hear me better if that's not it. Okay, so the fourth thing is, and this is so important, when you really want to be understood, you have to know what you want out of the conversation and why before you even start the conversation. Be very clear on the intention of the conversation. Why are you having it? What is your goal? What are you there to ask for? What are you there to not discuss? Like, what are you not available for? That's also important. In knowing what you are there for and what you want out of the conversation, knowing what you're not available for is also a really powerful way to not get derailed if your spouse tries to change a subject. And I think that the mistake that people make is that they usually don't know what it is. Maybe they're attached to an outcome that they don't even know what it is. This happens so much where you might be discussing something and all of a sudden you're in an argument. Why is that happening? Well, I got attached to something and now I want to prove my point, or maybe I'm looking for validation, but they think they want problem solving. So they're giving me problem solving, but I'm still looking for validation, right? So people can get their wires crossed if you're not clear on what you actually want out of a conversation. Also, I think if you can be clear, you're giving your partner the opportunity to win. Like, if they are really trying to help with problem solving and they're missing the mark because what you just want is emotional validation, if they know that, they might be able to give it to you, right? So you might be pleasantly surprised if you're really clear that you can get what you're looking for. Also, you'll know when you're not getting it, and you'll know that you can unhook sooner. So before things escalate, when you're clear, I'm here for this, I'm asking for this, it is not forthcoming. So I can just say, all right, I'm disappointed by that, but I don't have to continue fighting. It was a no. I asked for this and it was a no. So I'm going to have to go accept that and figure that out. And maybe I'll come back and try something later. But for now, with that level of clarity, you're not going to waste a lot of time going round and round in circles, not even knowing why you're arguing, which only just makes it worse the next time you try to be understood. And then the final thing, what I think is a really powerful and great way to reduce resistance to feedback that you're giving your spouse, or any communication really where you think that there could be resistance from them, is to overlap your goals. So where do your goals align with their goals? Where do your values align with their values or goals? Okay, so either one, you want to start there. So it could sound like, I really want X and I know that you want Y, but I know that we also both want Z. So how can we find a solution that works for both of us? We both want this. We both have the same Y. We might just have a different how we get there. Or, our long-term goal is similar. It's just the path we want to take looks a little bit different. Don't start at the path that you disagree on. Start with a backdrop where you can agree. Always lead with where you can agree. So what this requires is you do have to accept their position as different than your own. There can be no judgment of their difference of opinion, and there has to be radical acceptance on both sides. This is important to you. This is what you think is best. This is what's important to me. This is what I think is best. How do we then align the larger why or goals behind that to get creative about solutions? It might be more than one conversation. What about this? No, not that. What about this? No, not that. But you're not taking it personally, because you're not trying to get the other person to change their stance or to change their mind because they're wrong. You don't spend that time with convincing each other. I think most people spend way too much time convincing and making the other person wrong, and then that's where it ends. People then escalate, and then they shut down, and nothing gets resolved. They never got to the other side of the gridlock. So the more that you can speak as a we and assume that you're both on the same side of the table, that you're on the same team, that you do have aligning values, you do have shared goals, the easier it is to negotiate those differences. You're going to be able to be heard also when you are not trying to correct them, but instead just saying, this is important to me. I hope you honor that. I honor that that is important to you. So that's no longer up for discussion. Now we can free up so much energy that we would have spent arguing, resisting, defending, deflecting. And now we can just be really forward thinking and creative and open about how we move forward together on the same side. So those are the main things you want to keep in mind. Speaking from the I, separating feelings from thoughts, always coming in with a calm energy, especially when you know you want to communicate something that might be linked to something triggering. Know exactly what you want out of the conversation and why. And I'm telling you, it's a lot harder than it sounds, so don't skip that. And then always align with your mutual goals and have that be how you lead. What is your vision? Where does it align with theirs? And now within that context, now we can problem solve. If you can incorporate all these things over the next few weeks, I would be shocked if you didn't feel a difference or a shift. And I would love to hear how it goes. That's it for today. If you like my content, please take a second and either like this video or subscribe to my channel, or both. That will help us reach the people that really need to hear this stuff.